Welcome to PLUSone, the monthly series where I take a look at the free PlayStation Plus games and help you decide if they're worth downloading and playing. After all, the games may be free, but your time is valuable. July 2019's lineup has already been incredibly interesting, as for possibly the first time in the history of PS Plus, Sony caved and changed out a game due to fan backlash. The original lineup included 2018's arcade racing game Horizon Chase Turbo along with Pro Evolution Soccer 2019, but people weren't exactly happy getting what's usually considered the B-tier soccer game. So at the very last minute, Sony swapped out Pro Evolution Soccer with Detroit Become Human as a replacement, along with Horizon Chase Turbo. That's certainly a much better lineup for me at least, but are either of these games something that you should download and try? I know that many of you are ready to look past Horizon, but I think that some of you might be surprised. We'll get to that one in a bit though. You can skip to this point in the video if you want to watch that chunk of video now. First, let's begin with the one you're all here for, Detroit. Released in May 2018 as a PS4 exclusive title, Become Human sort of fell under the radar for a few reasons. For one, it came out a month after God of War, and by this point people were already gearing up for Spider-Man a few months later. And on top of that, this is a Quantic Dream game. Those of you that are longtime PLUSone viewers will certainly remember that name. This developer, led by director David Cage, is known for heavily narrative and choice-driven adventure games with, let's call them, interesting controls. These games are almost historically divisive love 'em or hate 'em kind of experiences. In fact, Quantic Dream's other two PS4/PS3 titles, Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, were both free PS Plus games right around the time of Detroit's release in an attempt to garner interest and push this game's sales up. Since this game is already free just over a year later, I'm gonna guess that those two didn't leave a great impression, and that's kind of a shame because I think Detroit is probably the strongest Quantic Dream game that I've played. If you don't really think about it too much. Detroit naturally takes place in the city of the same name in the year 2038. The advent of androids designed to make life easier for humanity has only exacerbated issues nationwide, spiking unemployment numbers to nearly 40% as technology has removed millions of human jobs. Androids in this world aren't in any way considered human by society, as they're designed to be entirely lesser than and subservient to humans, going all the way to be forced to stand at the back of buses. However, we quickly find that many androids have found their own free will and become what humans call deviants. This, along with the bubbling anti-android protests, has led to a city that's often hostile towards androids. If this all sounds like it hits a bit too hard on the nose as an allegory of America's race relations throughout its history, that's because David Cage is a very bad writer. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of promise in this story, but Cage's brand of writing everything at the most surface level possible cuts Detroit off at every possible turn. Like Quantic's other games before it, Detroit's successes come in spite of the director, not because of him. While just about every non-playable character is a poorly written impersonation of what people are like, and I'm talking about the human ones for the record, the game's three playable characters, all of whom are androids, struggle with their existence and agency in the world around them. Connor's story is probably my favorite of the three mechanically, because while it's just the cop sections of Heavy Rain all over again, it actually uses the whole "you're an android" thing in some sort of mechanical way as you're searching for clues that humans can't find. Kara's story is arguably the emotional focus of the game, centered around her connection to Alice, this little girl that she takes care of as a housekeeper for her druggy father. And Marcus's plot is where the ham-fisted civil rights parallels start coming to a head. I'm trying to keep this as vague as I possibly can so that those of you that play it go in fresh, but just know that Marcus's story ends up being the driving force behind the other two characters, and it arguably ruins those stories. So why then did I say that Detroit is probably the strongest of Quantic's three PS4 titles? Well, for one, the structure of the game is just plain better. This game has hundreds of choices for the player to make in just the first few hours, and Detroit caters to players who want to see the fallout of their decisions. In Heavy Rain, for example, one wrong move could kill one of those playable characters and completely alter the story, but you might not know what it is you did wrong without a guide or a flowchart. Meanwhile, Detroit learned from this, and those flowcharts are built right into the game, letting you see exactly what you missed in every chapter. And you can replay the game from any of these usually short chapters so that you can fill in new choices as you wish. Moreover, if you look past the bad writing that all three of Quantic's PS4 games have, Detroit to me has a far better premise and tells a far more gripping personal story, even if it devolves later on as the characters' paths intertwine and the scope of that story expands. Each character's fight with its respective programming just lands for me. To use an early example, Kara deciding to protect Alice from her abusive father when that father ordered Kara not to move is a no-brainer for anybody with a soul. but the fantastic face capture and animations captures that struggle better than any half-written David Cage line could've. Moreover, Connor deciding whether or not to expose a deviant who killed its abusive handler, or Marcus's internal dialogue as he's being attacked by his owner's abusive son. Actually, there's a lot of abuse in the first hour and change, wow. Well, on that note, that's another thing. There are only about 2 good humans in the entire plot, which takes away from the latter half of the narrative. An android's struggles can be super captivating by itself. Blade Runner is an easy example of that, but when it's bolded in an all humans bad font, yeesh. Anyway, it all depends on what you're looking for when it comes to Quantic's games. Heavy Rain and Beyond being so bad was part of the charm, and since Detroit takes itself so seriously and tries to touch on deeper subjects than a murder mystery and, ghosts, it's not something you can really play to laugh at like either of those games. But thankfully, if you'd rather laugh at a David Cage game than get frustrated with its poor writing, the version of Detroit that's free on PS Plus is the Digital Deluxe Edition, which comes with Heavy Rain for free as well. And trust me, that game is just a hilarious mess. If you want to know more about Heavy Rain though, you can check out my video on it by clicking that little iCard in the upper right hand corner of the screen. I don't really have much new to say about it. In short, the less you actually think about any of these games while playing them, the better. It's the video game equivalent of a popcorn movie that tries to submit for an Oscar nomination, sort of like The Room. I'm going a bit long here on this one, so I'm not going to touch much on the gameplay itself because it's just sort of there in Detroit. If you've played a Quantic game before, imagine that, but slightly better. Thousands of QuickTime events litter this game, from menial tasks like pulling up on the right stick to clean the house, to swiping the touchpad to paint, to performing quarter circles to open doors. It's your usual Quantic dream game. It's polished up a lot of the jank that Heavy Rain and Beyond had at least, so I'll take it. Plus, any game that looks this solid gets a little bit of slack from me, especially with the shoddy track record that most of these modern adventure games have visually. I just wish the frame rate wouldn't tank as often as it does. It's only holding at a constant 30 FPS, and it can barely manage that. With all of this criticism in mind, believe it or not, I would still give Detroit a +1 to your collection. That first few hours is just plain compelling, even if it does fall apart later on for you. And I'm certainly harder to please than some when it comes to storytelling in games, so many of you will probably enjoy that later part far more than I do. And with Heavy Rain included, you're bound to enjoy one of these two, even if it's just as a drinking game with friends where you're laughing at the ham-fisted writing in either. As for its file size, the Digital Deluxe version of Detroit that we're getting here runs you just under 80 gigs, with Detroit itself taking up just over half of that. For you trophy hunters out there, both Detroit and Heavy Rain are pretty quick platinums, only taking about a playthrough or two depending on how you go about cleaning up the missed choices. And as always, if you're watching this after July, Detroit runs for about $20, and the Digital Deluxe version that comes with Heavy Rain runs for $30. If you're gonna pay money for this game, at that point just pick up the Quantic Dream 3-pack for $40 and get Beyond as well. Now all we need is for Indigo Prophecy to hit PS Plus so I can complete this saga once and for all. The second, or I guess third free game for July is Horizon Chase Turbo. Clearly this looks like a much smaller title than Detroit, after all it's less than a gig in overall size, but believe it or not, this game might take you longer to beat thanks to its meaty, albeit repetitive campaign mode. Let's address the elephant in the room before I read it 100 times in the comments. Yes, Turbo, which usually goes for $20, is based on a $3 smartphone game titled Horizon Chase World Tour. Turbo adds about 20 tracks and 10 new cars to the package that World Tour began with, along with several new game modes and up to 4-player split-screen multiplayer that works in every single one of those modes. Whether that's all worth another $17 is up to you, but for the price of free, there's a ton of content here and I'm totally happy with that. As you've seen by now, Horizon Chase clearly looks and plays like a love letter to 80s and 90s arcade racers like Outrun and the early Top Gear games, and as just about the only modern game to tackle that subgenre, it sets a pretty high bar. Races are spread across 12 different regions, with beautiful level backgrounds representing areas within those regions in that classic flat polygonal style. California, to use the first region as an example, features San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sequoia National Park, each at different times of day depending on the race you choose. The 16-bit inspired aesthetic just feels so familiar, even to somebody who only experienced Outrun for the first time just a couple years ago. I will say that a few tracks go a little bit overboard visually, like this one where both the road and the grass surrounding the road alternate between two colors, and when you're going 120 miles per hour around a curve, that can get to be a little bit much. These moments aren't super common at least. The overwhelming majority of the time, this game looks just as timelessly fantastic as the retro racing inspired music sounds. Anyway, back to the gameplay. The tracks will start off simple, with long straightaways and wide turns, and gradually they'll grow more challenging as you progress. Each of the game's dozens of cars has its own unique stat layout, letting you prioritize acceleration, top speed, turning, or your nitrous boost to best suit the racetrack and your personal preference. On top of that, the final race in each region in the World Tour mode also gives you a permanent stat buff of your choosing that affects every car you own. Races in Horizon Chase Turbo are the absolute definition of bite-sized, usually running about 2 minutes at best as you take on up to 19 computer-controlled opponents. Even though it may only take you a few minutes for a 3 or even a 5-lap race most of the time, Horizon's got a real sense of speed that only increases as you unlock new, faster cars. There's nothing quite like zipping down these tracks. In a way, it starts to move away from Outrun and more into F-Zero territory later on in the game, and I'm certainly not complaining about that. Even as the difficulty progresses in the later tours, you'll never truly feel out of the race even if you crash your car several times or outright run out of gas, thanks to how forgiving it tends to be when it comes to your mistakes. And yes, you heard me right, you can run out of gas and be forced to wait for a refuel. Have no fear though, as gas tokens are almost always sprinkled on at least one stretch of tracks long enough to need them. Speaking of those tokens, every race in the World Tour mode also has these blue bonus tokens that will add to your overall progression score. These were my main source of challenge early on, as I would always breeze my way to a first place win for the first hour of playtime at least. Collecting all of the blue tokens and winning will net you a super trophy for that track, and you trophy hunters out there will need every one of these if you want that plat. In addition to the World Tour mode are more traditional tournament cups of 4 tracks each, a longer form endurance mode where you'll marathon up to every track in the game in one marathon, and my personal favorite, the Playground mode. Playground is a bite-sized take on seasonal content, where every 2 weeks a new set of themed levels will open up. Currently, the theme is Storm Chaser, featuring storms, slippery roads, and gimmicks such as turning off the game's HUD, giving you unlimited boosts, or giving you limited gas. It won't keep the game alive for you for too long, especially if you're already going for that 100% completion, but I would say it does enough to warrant keeping Horizon Chase on your hard drive so you can check back every few months or so. For all the complaints I've seen online about its Plus appearance, Horizon Chase Turbo is the kind of game that I feel is absolutely perfect for PS Plus. It's actually a game I wanted to buy just a few months ago, but I held off hoping for a sale just in case it wasn't what I was hoping for. Sony did me one better by giving it to me for free. If you're a fan of relaxing pick-up-and-play experiences, of this retro style of arcade racer, or of couch multiplayer, there's no reason not to PLUSone this one to your collection. I wouldn't recommend marathoning it because the gameplay isn't going to magically change after just a few hours, but if you're chipping at it every now and then, I think you'll be surprised at how frequently you get hooked in. Just one more is something you're going to be saying many, many times here. For you trophy hunters out there, you'll have to beat every track once in World Tour mode while getting every blue token in each, then beat every track again a few times in the tournament mode on each difficulty, and then come in at least 5th place in every track in endurance mode all at once, so be prepared for a good amount of grind, but a fun one at that. Horizon Chase Turbo really is a perfect blend of speedy, addictive gameplay and quick pick-up-and-play action. Wow, I had a lot more to say here than I thought I did, but then I was also expecting to describe soccer until Sony swapped Pro Evolution Soccer out. I can definitely put more time into talking about the social ramifications of sentient androids than soccer, that's for sure. Which game are you gonna play the most from July's lineup? Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're down there, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more if you haven't already. While you're at it, if I've helped you make up your mind on one of this month's games, consider sharing this video with your friends so I can help them out too. I'll see you folks next week for another video, so until then, as always, stay golden.